Okay, I guess we can start. Um, so hey guys, I'm Michael. I'm your host today, and then today's session is brought to you by Inspired Advantage, an admission consulting firm with extensive experience helping candidates get accepted to their dream graduate schools with scholarships, and Kaplan, who has been helping students achieve MCAT success for more than 80 years and offers courses that are personalized to you, offer thousands of realistic practice questions and practice tests, and are led by expert Kaplan teachers. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Danielle Jones, known online as Mama Dr. Jones, a board-certified OBGYN and online educator who has amassed a following of over 3.3 million now, right, across the platforms. She is an expert in periods, pregnancy, and gynecological health, and is passionate about science education, autonomy, and patient-centered care. She's been featured in the New York Times on the cover of People Health and is frequently featured as an expert by various news and media outlets. Before we say welcome, Dr. Jones, which is usually my final line, I just want to take the extra time to really appreciate Dr. Jones because, yeah, like I'm so grateful that you're still speaking for the conference, even though you're experiencing some
my voice is going. What he's trying to say is that I sound terrible.
No, I didn't mean that. You still sound good, but yeah. So sorry to hear that, but really appreciate that you're speaking at our conference and sharing with us.
Oh, I appreciate you for having me and for inviting me here and for that nice introduction. You guys feel free to type into the chat. Especially because my voice is really going to struggle through this. I hope that doesn't make you want to leave, but I will try to interact a little bit with the chat in case there's something I say that you don't understand because of every other word being not able to be heard. I'm going to share my screen so that we can get going. Just one second. Let me move my tabs around. Okay. My presentation on this side. There we go. Can you see that okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And as always, for our attendees, if you have questions for Dr. Jones, just feel free to use the Q&A function below and drop your questions over there and make sure that uploads the question that you would like. Okay.
Perfect. So part of this is going to be a little bit about my journey into medicine, and part of it's going to be a little bit about just kind of what I do on the internet and social media and why I think that's relevant and important to what we do as physicians. So for those of you who don't know, I am Danielle Jones. I'm a board certified OBGYN. I'm originally from the US, and that's where I did all of my training and where I've spent my whole life in Texas. And now I live happily in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And we have been living here about a year and a half now, I guess a little longer than that. And on the internet, I spend my time, or my goal is to spend my time educating and advocating for women and AFAB people. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey as a physician learner and educator on social media, but also go through kind of the process of my own journey into medicine and how I decided to go into this field in particular, because I spent a lot of time in med school thinking that this is the last field that I would go into, which probably surprises some people who are familiar with my content, because I think it comes across how incredibly perfect this is for me and how important it is, I think, for everybody. I also co-founded a conference. I have 4 children who are off to soccer at the moment, and I love all of the various jobs that I have in this life. So how did I get here? How did I get here to be delivering babies and on a New York Times article and speaking on CNN expert reference for COVID and pregnancy and speaking at conferences and things like that. I think that my journey into medicine starts a little bit with my social media journey, but I'm actually jumping ahead a bit here. But as far as how I ended up what I do on social media, I've been online as a person in medicine since 2009. And I see the conference in the chat, and just to be transparent, I am a co-founder of the conference, but I'm no longer involved with the conference. I started on social media in 2009, and I was doing kind of what I do now, but really more of a connecting with other medical students rather than educating other people about my field, because at that point I didn't really have an expertise. I just kind of saw the benefit that early. And I think in 2009, it was really weird to be on the internet as a person in medicine. For example, I remember getting called to the principal's office, just technically just reprimanded for posting a photo on my blog of a sim character we just had like a simulation day, and they just were scared that I was going to go rogue and, start posting patients or something, which is so silly, now in hindsight, given what I do, but it was just a very weird time back then. So what does social media have to do with any of this? And why am I leading a discussion about my job as an ONG consultant with talking about social media? The reason is because I think there's a big gap in medical education. And I think that gap is in learning about people and their stories from firsthand accounts. And that's how I got involved in social media. I was listening to people in the infertility and loss community as they shared their stories, things their doctors did that were either not the best thing that they could have done, or what I think has become my main goal as a physician. They were sharing their stories of doctors who made their worst day even worse. And that led me to a point where my goal, and what I tell anybody who's working with me as I'm educating them, if the registrars or the medical students or whoever, is that we can't always make every situation better. But by understanding a patient's point of view, we can avoid being the person who makes it worse. And I want our goals in medicine to be, you are never the person who walks into a room, and even if it's only by way of not knowing how to respond to a situation, you are never to make that day worse for somebody. And the way I think that we do that, or one way that we do that, is by putting some effort in to truly learn about how patients process things. And for me, what this brought was, I can walk into a room and know that if it's a miscarriage patient, I want to ask them how they feel about it, what's going through their head, because people have a range of ways that they respond to things like this. And any of those emotions is okay. You can validate somebody's feelings of grief. You can validate somebody's feelings of relief. You can validate someone's feelings of anger. Even if it's anger towards you, you can validate that. And that's the way that you avoid making these horrible days worse, because our job is just to never do that. So my medical journey, and a little bit less heavy topic, I got into medicine a year later than most people who do their training in the US, but it's very different from probably the way that a lot of you get into medicine. In the US, we do our university training first. So I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I would be a clinical psychologist, but instead I just really found that I was no good at writing, very lengthy papers. And so I decided to apply to med school. So in 2008, I graduated from Texas A&M University, and I also got rejected from med school. And this was a big hurdle for how to proceed from there. I decided at that point I would just take a gap year and try again. So I applied after taking a gap year working as a medical assistant, and I got accepted and started med school in 2009. In 2009, I also married my husband, who was in the previous photo, and we moved across Texas to start medical school. So lots of studying. I think a lot of you probably understand how this feels. I probably don't understand how that feels anymore, learning these very detailed things that I've now replaced with hopefully things that are more relevant to my day-to-day life. Although I will say this particular depiction has some relevance to obstetrics. So lots of studying, and I don't remember much of the brachial plexus. I definitely don't remember days when I could chart this out from memory, but it is something interestingly that comes into play in my day-to-day life delivering babies that I have to take into account. So I think all of that to say is that it sometimes feels like you're just learning things to learn them. Maybe sometimes we are, but also having a good foundation, whether you remember every single little detail or not, is what sets you up to be successful, because you have to build on these things and they will come into play in your career at some point. I remember making this chart and thinking none of this will ever be useful to my life ever again. And I was the story I told earlier of getting in trouble for posting a sim picture on my blog is this photo right here. It kind of gives me some PTSD looking at it because I remember being so scared that they were really going to like kick me out of med school or something after I worked so hard to get there. And now looking back, I just think, gosh, it was so silly that they would get mad at that. But, you know, there's valid reasons to worry about what people do on the internet. And we see some of that in people getting in trouble. But I think you can easily decipher what's okay and what's not okay to do as a medical professional on the internet. So in 2011, I did my OB where I live now. I don't know why there was a dog in our OBGYN clinic that day, but there you go. It has specific relevance to today because at the end of that rotation was 6 weeks on the OB-GYN rotation. We were going on a trip to New Zealand. And I remember talking to my partner on the plane and saying, I'm really sad that this rotation is ending. He's like, you've been getting up at 5 a.m. and getting home at 8 p.m. for 6 weeks. Why would you be sad? And I was like, I don't know. I just really liked it. I thought it was really interesting. And he's like, we're going to New Zealand and you're worried about being sad that your rotation's ending. And that was the first point where I thought, oh, yeah, that's kind of, maybe this is something that I'm interested in doing, because prior to that, I just didn't think I had it in me to be a surgeon or to do the kind of high stress, high acuity environment that comes along with obstetrics. In 2012, my friend and I convinced our med school to pay for us to go to Stanford MedX and for us to start a social media and healthcare guidance organization at our med school. And at the time, I think we thought we were doing it just to get a free trip to a conference that we wanted to go to. But looking back, I think this was really the start of my advocacy for people who are in healthcare to find their place in the online space. And I learned a lot at that conference, and that conference meshed well with what I now see as my purpose on the internet and learning from other people's stories. And I'm thankful for patients who share their stories there. And this person in the middle of that photo, this patient advocate who spoke at that conference. I was at that time pregnant. So I had an ultrasound that year. And wanting to be a mother was a reason that I thought that I could never do O&G. I knew I wanted to have a family. I got married young. I'm so sorry. I got married young, and my husband and I had been together by the time I got out of med school. We'd been together for 6 years and married for 4. And so we had been trying to get pregnant, and I got pregnant that year, and I ended up with a bonus baby. And these are our girls who are now 10. They were born in the last 6 months of med school for me. That means I started my intern year with babies who were about 6 months old. An intern year in O&G in the US is about 80 hours a week when you lie about your hours to not get in trouble. A lot of times we were there more than that. But I matched the top program that I had applied for and where I really, really wanted to go. And I think that is only important for me to say, not because I want you to think, oh, I'm so smart or I'm so wonderful, but because I didn't get into med school the first time I applied. And that is an interesting thing to me because I knew I had it in me to do this. And I knew I had it in me enough that I I matched my top choice, which is a big deal. And so I want people to hear that story, because I want you to know that you can fail at something and it can still be something that's really good for you. And it's okay to try again and to bring your confidence back and know that if you really want to do it, you can make it happen. So I started residency with my 2 6-month-olds, and we spent 4 years together working 60 to 80 hours a week. And for the most part, people hear that and they think, oh God, that must have been terrible. And I think it was on some level a bit terrible, but it was also a finite chapter that I knew would come to a close. And it allowed me to kind of compartmentalize that. I only had time to learn how to be a great doctor and to come home and be a great mom. And so my social media stuff kind of took a back seat, and I didn't really do anything for about 4 years with regards to social media while I was in residency. I had another baby in residency. That picture is from doing a fetal transfusion where the Lorlock syringe didn't get attached. If you've seen Dr. Glockenfecken's podcast that I did with him, I tell that story. So yeah, no harm, no patients were harmed in the making of that blood spatter, but it looked a bit like a Halloween party. I was pregnant with my son at the time, and I was very thankful that it was completely irradiated blood that was safe enough to give to a fetus, and all was well. So Milo was born my last year of residency, right at the beginning of my last year. And we moved away about a year after that. And I finally got to have a big kid job. So my first, what we call in the States, an attending job, but what we would call here is probably at that point, I don't know if it was it probably would have been a consultant job. The overlap's not exactly the same though. This is one of my favorite pictures, actually. That was a baby I delivered in residency, and one of the first fertility patients that I got to take care of. And I was just so thankful she gave me that photo and allowed me to use it and told me I have permission to use it, because I don't think we get a lot of pictures of us doing our job, and to see me getting to do a job that I love and a patient having that be such an important part of their life, it's really special to me. I had another baby in my attending year of 2018. That was my baby that was born in my private practice. So I have kind of the trifecta of medical training pregnancies, one in med school, one in residency, and one in my attending years. I only took about 4 or 5 weeks off with my son after my C-section. And so this year when I got pregnant, I told my private practice I was going to take the wonderful 10-week maternity leave that is not at all something that we can mostly do in the US. And I was met with in a public meeting, my male colleague, another physician, an OBGYN physician who takes care of people who are pregnant and has daughters of his own, said to me, do you really think that you need 10 weeks off? I only took 2 weeks when I had my prostate removed. And I said, exactly that, nothing. I said nothing. And I just got up and left because I was so flabbergasted that somebody would have the audacity to say that. And maybe in hindsight, he was joking and it kind of fell flat. But obviously, if you're going to, have the courage to say something like that in a public meeting, it's probably not completely a joke. And I just left. And that was the day that I knew that not only would I take my full 10 weeks of maternity leave, but I was done with that practice. I was not in an environment that was supportive, and I would not be staying there, which was sad for me because I really liked a lot of my colleagues there. I was just 2 really toxic male colleagues who made it just a really negative environment to work in. So I took my 10 weeks. I spent that time, just learning to get to know my son. And I also started my YouTube channel on that maternity leave because I guess I decided I didn't have enough things to do. And then after that, we just started deciding what we wanted to do as far as moving and all of that. And I had kind of lost faith in my male colleagues after that, despite having had really good male colleagues prior to that, I just thought, maybe this generation that's one generation older than me just can't be supportive of women in medicine. Maybe they just can't be supportive. And that's just how they were trained. Maybe that's just their, I don't know. Maybe it's just how it is. But I got for myself, make sure that I could juggle. And I always come back to a quote by, I think it's from the author Nora Roberts. And I'm honestly not sure where I originally even came across it, but it is attributed to her that when we are moving through life, we have to think about all the things that we're doing as juggling. And most of the balls that you're juggling are going to be made of plastic. So this conference speaking here today was made of plastic. And my obligations that I have next week for digital work are plastic, but there's a few things in life that are glass balls. And that is, for me, my family, my career, and my own health and well-being. And so when you're juggling, instead of just letting all the balls drop, because if you drop the glass balls, they break, you have to pick a plastic ball to sit down sometimes. So when I get really overwhelmed, or I feel like I'm not at a point where I'm balancing well, I just pick a ball to sit down. And sometimes it's social media, and sometimes it's little things that I've agreed to that I need to back out of. And sometimes it's just saying no to things that people ask me to do. But whatever it is, I think we can all use this analogy to recognize what in our life is a plastic versus a glass ball. And I think that's a really helpful visual for me in learning how to juggle kind of all of the things that I do. So I spent my maternity leave with PAX, learning to breastfeed my baby, and then starting the YouTube channel. I need to go back. Actually, this photo. We loved New Zealand before we moved here. We had visited twice before we moved here, but this is a map that we put into Pax's room well before we knew we were moving here, and it says Wahihati, which is my happy place. And I love that in these photos of me on maternity leave with my son, which was the point where we decided we're doing something different for sure, but we didn't know what it would be, that we have this as the backdrop because it's been such a positive thing for my family to move here. So finding balance is hard, and I don't ever consider myself to be really good at this, but I do think it's important starting now where you are. I think it's important to start working on balance from day one. You take it one step at a time, and the pendulums will swing. I, on a day-to-day basis, cannot look at my life and call it balanced. Yesterday, I was operating all day long. My husband wanted to go out to dinner with the kids. I said, I can't. I had 5 surgeries today and had to give really bad news to someone. And I just can't. I can't do it today. I have to stay home. And he's like, okay, that's fine. So if I looked at yesterday, I would say my life is out of balance. It's just work. But I think we have to look at our life as more of a snapshot over time, not as a single point in time. So I need to look back over the past 3 months or 4 months, and in that time, can I see that I'm dedicating the time I want and need to each of my children and to my partner and to my family? Am I dedicating enough time to myself? And what am I dedicating to the things that I love in my career, which is both my clinical work and operating, as well as what I do on the internet? And you can feel, I think, especially at the point that y'all are at in life, you often feel like you're just kind of on this treadmill of a journey to find balance. And you're applying and you're waiting to be chosen. And everything feels like you have to be picked and that you don't have any power. And that can be really demoralizing. I think it's important for you to know that you do get to advocate for yourself, and you don't have to say yes to anything that you don't want, even if you feel like you don't have the power. So it was really freeing to me when my first children were born. And I said to my husband, I don't know, I think maybe I don't want to go to residency. I can't imagine leaving them and working 80 hours a week. And he said, well, then don't go. And I said, we have $190,000 in debt. I can't just not go. We won't ever pay that back. And he said, it wouldn't be easy and it would suck to do all this work, but you don't have to do residency. And I thought, I guess technically you're right. This is a choice. And when I started looking at the treadmill as I have the choice to get off, I don't have to keep going. it became easier to know what I wanted to do. And it was clear to me in that moment that I wanted to keep going because I love what I do. So I think just recognizing that you have a choice in things is really helpful as well. I'm going a bit over, so I don't want to go too much into this, but I also want you to know that self-doubt is really normal. This is my friend Nate. He was my partner in Cadaver Lab. I met him in day one, and I was just thought, my God, Nate's so smart. He knows all of this stuff. And I think somebody accidentally put my application through, stuck to the back of someone else's, and this med school let me in by accident. And I just was really like, I had a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and I still have that sometimes. I think a lot of people do, but you get to a point where you have to overcome that. And I think for me, the secret that I wish I would have known is that everybody feels that way, that your voice is valuable, and you won't believe that your voice is valuable until you start using it. So practice using it. You're not an imposter. Everyone feels that way. They may not show it, and you may see it in yourself and not others. And I promise most people don't see it in you, but you have to know that everybody feels that way. And you can't let that keep you from taking on some things that scare you. It will hold you back if you do. Everyone is just as confused and unsure as you are. So when you feel those feelings of like, oh my gosh, I'm confused, I don't know how to study, I don't know how to do this or that, and everybody else is just doing great, just feel those feelings and process them and let them go, knowing that everybody feels that way at some point. So all of these things come down to something that I think is really, really important. And that is that we have to say yes to opportunities that make us nervous. That's one way I've found to get over that self-doubt. When something comes up that makes you nervous and you don't know if you can actually say yes to that and do it, say yes to it, take on some chances. And if you fail, it's okay, because you're better off that you at least have given that a shot. So, kia ora, thank you for being here. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them. And I hope that was beneficial. You can find me anywhere on social media as Mom Dr. Jones. That's probably a better way to get a hold of me. It's just to send me a DM rather than an email, because I get so many emails and I have somebody who helps me go through those. But for social media, I try to answer. I try to at least read all of those. Twitter's probably the least popular social media I have. So if you really want me to see your message, then you send it on Twitter.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for such an amazing presentation on your journey pursuing essentially where you are today. Yeah, we're just gonna be diving into the question. Are you feeling okay, by the way?
Yeah, I really feel fine. I just
Okay.
I sound terrible.
No, it's all good. We really, really appreciate the insights. It's such an amazing presentation, honestly. I personally have a lot of takeaways. Especially honestly when the part that you were talking about your male coworkers, basically. But yeah,
Oh, can
anyhow.
I add something to that, please? So I had lost faith in my male coworkers, and I needed to follow that up by saying, I came to New Zealand and I am now a part of a team that I have never felt such support in my life. And I have 3 male ONG consultant coworkers who are all American, who all are incredibly supportive, who encourage us all to take care of ourselves and do what's best for our family, and who are just incredibly turned on to the different ways that sexism affects medicine. And to the point that one of them came up to me one day when I was having some issues in theater and said, that wouldn't be happening to me because I'm a man. They would not treat me this way. And you need to stand up for yourself. And I just wanted to add that because it was just those 2 guys. It wasn't
Yeah.
everybody. And
Yeah.
I think you can find the right people who will support you.
I think my major takeaway is just like sometimes we do need to critically evaluate our own perspectives and how that leads to like misjudgment and like insensitive like words to others. And honestly, like that's a thing when it comes to interpersonal relationships. And also that's a part of patient care as well. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, let's dive into the questions then. So Sydney was asking that like, what are your thoughts on integrating or integrative OBGYNs that are really trying to get the root cause of women's health issues and taking into account nutrition, lifestyle, etc., to form treatment options? Just like, is it kind of a trend that's going on in the field, and what's the outlook for that?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it, but I think that's always going to come down to the person who's doing it, right? So there's a really negative and manipulative way that you can do things like that. And there's a really positive way. Obviously, nutrition and lifestyle and all these things are important. And as Western medicine trained people, we don't always get, we never get great training in that. So I don't think it's a negative thing, but I do think that even in the way that this is worded, you see that it implies that as regular OB-GYNs, we don't care about getting to the root cause of people's problems. I think that's probably true for some people, especially in the US capitalist medicine, where you're not allowed to spend any time with a patient because you got to get through people too fast. But I do think that there is space for that in normal OB-GYN as well.
Okay, great. And our next question is actually like, this is kind of an interesting question too. It's like, when you were a medical student, was there a particular course that you found to be extremely difficult? And how did you kind of like overcome that challenge without feeling that you're forcing, without feeling like you had to force yourself to like a course? What may be struggling with?
I mean, I almost dropped out after anatomy, honestly, not because like looking back, I think the course itself wasn't that hard. I just wasn't prepared for how fast things would move. And I hadn't really learned to study. I had kind of gotten through undergrad by just figuring it out, I guess, like never really developing a system for myself. So it took both getting my own self-doubt and some of my own mental health things under control, and also developing a studying system and truly learning like what is my study style, what works for me. So that was real difficult. And then, I mean, pharmacology I thought was very hard. I did not force myself to like it. I hated it and I still hate it, but I just forced myself to learn it. And you have to do that sometimes. I mean, it's part of it. I think part of it is as you go through, you figure out what do I not hate? What do I really like? And for me, even in anatomy, sitting down and learning reproductive anatomy was really fun to me. And learning reproductive physiology was really fun to me. And so I just still at that point didn't think I wanted to do O&G. And then in hindsight, when I liked the rotation, I was like, okay, duh, I just wasn't even paying attention to the things that I really liked. And what I really liked was that area. So if you find an area of the basic stuff, like the bench stuff, the stuff you're doing in the first 2 years of med school and the way that it is at home, then lean into that, put it in your head that like, this might be something that I can do. Because for me now, the fact that I can still find something really interesting about OB-GYN and dive into a deep rabbit hole of basic physiology for 2 hours and then teach it to somebody on the internet and truly enjoy it is what makes my job really fun.
Yeah, I honestly feel like that's a great take on this question, because like, even if you're pursuing a career in physician, I feel like, or in medicine, which means that you're pursuing to like be a physician in the future, like, even though you're practicing medicine, that does not mean that you are liking every aspect of medicine. Not even to mention that, like, you will like, for example, like if you're a surgeon, you will like the entirety of like internal medicine, radiology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every single specialty. I don't think like, yeah, I think it's like better to like just like evaluate what your strong suit is at, as well as like what you're passionate about. And I guess like you don't like, you have all the right to like dislike a course. I think that's what I take away
Right.
about it.
I had a degree in psychology and I hated my psych rotation. I mean, it's just how it works out sometimes. I loved internal medicine, but I loved the rotation, but I couldn't sit and learn about pulmonary fibrosis like I could learn about abruption and preeclampsia.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for that answer. And then there's another question, which is actually on your sort of at your on your like personal journey. So this person is then wondering like, what does your husband do, and how have you managed being a mother and a physician at the same time? And this person is a pre-med, and then I'm assuming that her partner is applying to med school currently. But having a family is very important for both of them. So that's why she's really considering a PI and PA like route, as well as other professions because of this.
Yeah. I never considered PA or NP. And the reason isn't because I have anything against them. I had great advanced practice providers that I've worked with. One of my best friends from my private practice here is a PA. I don't know that it changes much of the balance issue. PA school is also really difficult. It's not the same as residency, and residency is hard, but I think you should make that decision based on what you want to do and not because you're afraid of how hard it will be. If I had made my decision on specialty because of how hard I was afraid that it would be with my kids, I wouldn't be in this field. And I'm really, really happy that I'm in this field. It was hard, but it was tolerable because I was doing exactly what I loved and what I wanted to do. And that's the only reason it was tolerable. If I had gone into pediatrics like I thought I wanted to, or like I was thinking I would do because I felt like the balance would be better, I would hate my job right now. And that's not worth it. Not if you're going to put in a bunch of hard work, you should do it for what you want to do. And that doesn't mean that you don't really want to be an NP or PA. I don't know that. You just have to choose what you think you really want to do. My partner is not in medicine. We met in undergrad, and he is a computer engineer. He does software development, web development mainly. He was full-time employed up until we moved to New Zealand, doing that job. He now is essentially a stay-at-home dad, but not to minimize that because he also does a ton of work for the MDJ business, and I would fall apart without his help. So he has not only the job of carting around our kids to all their various things that he's signed them up for, because I would have been like, no, it's fine. You can just play outside. I'm not signing up for anything. But if he wants to sign them up for things, that's fine. Takes them to things. Yeah, I think you just have to find your balance. And it's a process of having a supportive partner. I had I had residency friends who were in double physician relationships. It's not easy. It was very hard for them, but they made it work. I mean, they're all still together and they have kids and they did fine. So I would never tell someone it's easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. You're constantly going to feel like you're juggling, but you can make it work.
Yeah, I think like what you mentioned basically during your presentation about like juggling the glass balls as well as like the plastic ones, is like at the end of the day, one has to like interrogate themselves, or actually if it's kind of a them and the partner sort of collective decision point, they will need to interrogate themselves as a whole. Like, what do you really want to prioritize? And like basically decide from there, like what's important to you and what's kind of a lifestyle that you would like,
Exactly.
basically. Yeah. And okay, and the next question is going to be that, so yeah, this person is wondering like, are there any additional steps that you had to take as a US trained physician starting practicing in another country? I guess like this could be like on two specific perspectives. One is like what the US require you to do and what the other country requires you to do, I guess.
Um, I think it's really hard to come to the US as a physician that trained somewhere else. I don't know anything about that. I've never done that. It's going to depend where you're going for doing it the other way. For me, coming here, it's a lot of paperwork, but the field that I'm in tends to translate fairly easily. Some specialties don't do it quite as easily because the training is so different here. So there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of money, and a lot of time. I'm still technically a provisional license here, which just means I have somebody who's been in New Zealand longer overseeing it because the health system's so different here. As you learn how to navigate that, you need help. And because the training system is so different here, they want to make sure that you're actually well trained to do what you're doing. So you have a year and a half or so of provisional licensing, but it translated fine. I didn't have to do any extra tests or training or anything. I imagine that for some countries that wouldn't be the case though.
Right. Actually, like the question I asked earlier was about like, are there any requirements from the US side when you're moving out of the country, or actually like when you're practicing somewhere else?
No, I've just made the decision, even though it's really expensive, to keep my Texas license because
Okay.
getting a license in Texas is difficult and expensive and a pain in the ass. And I'm sorry,
Right.
I just didn't want to do it again. Yeah, in hindsight, I mean, I think at this point, we only plan to come here for a year. We were going to go back. It's just a bit hard in my field to go back to Texas at the moment. And the schools here are really safe. So there's not much attractive about taking my kids back to the US at the moment.
Right. Okay. In the interest of time and for the sake of Dr. Jones' voice, let's basically conclude. Dr. Jones, before we conclude, do you have any like one-liner suggestions or takeaways for our audience today?
I've just looked through some of these questions and I have videos that answer a lot of them. I have several videos about my journey, the older videos on my YouTube channel. And also, I live stream on Twitch. So if you guys want to ask these questions, just come to the Twitch chat and ask them. I'm always happy to interact. So usually Sundays, like US time Sundays around 4 or so p.m., I'll be on Twitch live streaming. So just come and we'll answer them there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Honestly, check every single social platform that Dr. Jones is present on. Make sure to do that. And yeah, let's give the loudest virtual applaud, which is represented by the clap emoji here, to Dr. Jones. Thank you so much for speaking at our conference. It was such an amazing time for the past 45 minutes, just to like hear about your journey and learning the insights that you provided. Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, of course, our pleasure. And for our attendees, we're going to shift toward our, I think it's presumably last session of MHC. Wow, time really flies. That's going to be happening about just in a couple minutes. So yeah, I'll